Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. I'm your host, Claire Hoon, and every week we hand the mic to women who are showing up, speaking out, and figuring it out in real time. Because when women start talking, no topic is off limits. Careers, identity shifts, friendships, family dynamics, breakups, big dreams, bigger feelings, and yes, motherhood too. Think of it like calling your best friend on the landline in 1999. Lighthearted, unfiltered, and somehow deeper than you expected. Whether you're raising your kids, raising standards, or raising hell, this space is for you. So settle in. It's time to catch up. Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. I'm your host, Claire Hoon, and today we are catching up with Hattie. Hattie is twin mom of two. She is the founder of Hattie Sparks Interiors. Been wanting to invite Hattie on for months and finally got up the courage to send the email. We talk about the unhinged email that I sent her a couple of weeks ago and her immediate yes to come on the show. I've been following Hattie since I was in college. She had a store not too far from our campus. And after I moved out of New Orleans, I continued to follow her. She shared her life journey, what she was going through, from trying to get pregnant to becoming a twin mom, going through divorce, and finding love again. Hattie shares all of her life experiences layered in with how the store she used to have up on Maple Street has transformed into the design business she owns today. She talks about breaking into an industry that is notoriously hard, what it's been like for her, her firm, and finding bravery through it all. We talk about what it means to be brave and showing up for ourselves when it doesn't always feel good to do so. What I loved most about this conversation is that Hattie was as easy to talk to as she appears on social media. You just never know sometimes when you reach out and you don't know the person on the other side because we all portray a version of ourselves online. And I loved how down to earth Hattie was. I love how easy she is to talk with and how open. We had such a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Also, this episode is coming out at the beginning of the Knicks being in the finals. Maybe they've won by now, or maybe we're about to sweep it. Hattie, welcome to the Catch Up with Claire.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited about this conversation. There is so much that we're going to chat about today, as we were just sharing and in some of the emails we've exchanged. But before we dive into it, this is going to be embarrassing if I made this up, but I don't think I did. Are you a Knicks fan?
Okay, I am, and I'm going to tell you how I came to be a Knicks fan.
I was wondering.
I, so I'm from Houston originally. I've lived in New Orleans almost 20 years, and I love basketball. My wife jokes, she's like, "You're just a fan of the league," and I really am. But a couple years ago, she was traveling a lot for work, and I don't remember what it was, but I watched some series on Netflix while she was gone, and she was like, "You can't start a new series without me. Like, I don't want to miss out." So Emily in Paris was the only one that she didn't care about missing out on. So once I was done with that, I was home and trying to figure out what to watch, and March Madness was on. And so I started watching March Madness. I got really into it. And I've always been a sports girl. I played a million sports growing up, and I like watching sports. I like the drama of it. I like diving deep into the players' lives and backgrounds. So I went from March Madness straight into the NBA playoffs, and the Pelicans are the New Orleans team. I was a Spurs fan for a really long time because my parents moved outside of San Antonio when I was 16. And that was during the Spurs, epic championship dynasty run. But the playoffs 3 years ago, I needed to pick a team to root for. And so I picked the Knicks. And I don't know what it was about them. And I still don't know what it is about them, but I just love this team, and they're really exciting to watch. And they have a great energy and camaraderie. And it's fun to see players like Jose Alvarado, who was with the Pelicans for a long time, come in, and he's from New York. So it's kind of a really cool homecoming for him. Karl Anthony Towns, love him. Jalen Brunson. I mean, the whole crew, big fan. And the new coach has done a fantastic job. So I'm kind of hoping for a Spurs Knicks final. I don't know. I'm gonna have to
Okay.
get I'm gonna have to get like a house divided shirt because I love the Spurs too. And I stayed up so late last night watching their first game versus the Thunder. And Wemby is incredible. He's just doing things that are like no center in basketball. Okay, you can tell already. I watch a lot of basketball and I
I love it.
get a lot of basketball content, but he's really exciting to watch. And the Spurs team is so young. I mean, they're starting five. They range from like 20 to like 23 years old or something. So they're the youngest starting five in playoff history. So they're, knock on wood, going to be good for a while. So I'm going to be watching tonight, game one, Knicks Cavs. So go Knicks and fingers crossed.
Okay, I am so glad. So, like, I knew I saw you at one point talk about the Knicks, and tonight is our game one. I set up the
Hmm.
playoffs earlier, and my husband was like, "It's the Eastern Final Conference," and I'm like, "Okay, sorry." It's to me.
Technically, though, you're right. It is still the playoffs.
Thank you,
That's the umbrella,
thank
and
you.
it's the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah.
And likely when this comes out in a couple weeks, we will have won this series and we will be in the final. We're
Yes.
pulling for OKC. I don't know why, other than my 7-year-old and my husband say that that gives us the best chance at winning. But we can be divided on that. If the common we root for is the Knicks pulling through, whoever we have to beat to do that, we'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, OKC, they're very, very fun to watch too. I really liked watching them last year, and SGA is an incredible player. Um, but Spurs Knicks, I just feel like that's such a throwback, and for both teams to be in the finals again, it would be really incredible. I mean, the Knicks haven't won a championship since the 70s, and the Spurs haven't been in the playoffs since, I don't know, 2018, 2019. So it's kind of nice to have some different teams in the mix.
It's gonna be fun. The next couple
Yeah.
weeks of basketball are gonna be fun.
I
Okay.
know, and then then I'm like, "What do I watch?" I guess I go right into tennis. I watch a lot of tennis too.
We'll have Wimbledon, and then have you been to New York and done the US Open?
Yes, we came up there 2 years ago. We saw some really incredible tennis. It was me, 2 of my sisters, my wife, and then, one of my best friends from here, and we did 1 day and then had 1 day in the city and then another day of tennis, and we saw some really incredible matches. What I love about the US Open, that venue, is it's not that big
Mhm.
and there's so many celebrities and pro athletes there. So we saw Stephen Colbert and John Mayer, and we walked to the bathroom and Serena Williams was right there. Alicia Keys. I mean, it was really, really fun. When tour, she was, with the sunglasses on, arms crossed. It was really cool to experience that level of a sport in a tighter venue because,
Mhm.
football games, basketball games, it's a lot grander. It feels a lot grander, but it was very civilized. We were all saying, this is our favorite sporting event we've ever been to. The food was great. The people watching was great. The outfits were incredible. The tennis was awesome. So our little group is trying to find a way to go back, but I think we might actually do Indian Wells in Palm Springs next year. It's kind of like right after Mardi Gras. So I want to hit all the majors, but Australia might be a stretch, but
That's a
maybe
far one.
Wimbledon and French Open could happen in the next couple years or so. We'll see.
You're definitely motivating me because we lived here for over a decade now, and every year we're like, "Oh, it's just a subway ride away. Of
It's
course
right there.
we're just gonna go." Have never been.
My
And
gosh, you'll
I need
have to
to.
go. It's so fun. There's a lot of fan experience activations outside, which I think is so smart of them to do. I know Indian Wells is doing a lot of that as well. It makes tennis is really exciting. I mean, they're incredible athletes. I play tennis once a week and my thought is always, I think I'm so good. I watch like a playback and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is so pathetic." But they're such incredible athletes. They've amazing stamina. It's really fun to watch. But, there's some lag time. The matches are long. So they've been building up kind of the fan experience outside, which is really fun. And it's fun to kind of walk around the grounds and get a drink and something to eat and go check out the merch. I mean, the merch is a whole thing. You've got this like whole Ralph Lauren store built out um, at the tennis centers. If y'all have the chance to go, you should definitely go.
Well, I love what you say about the whole experience, and I feel like that's when I'm bought into something, when it's not just walk in, swipe my ticket, watch something, leave, but especially because, like
Yeah.
you said, there's so many different matches going on, the whole and even in the city, I mean, like, I know Grand Central has a whole activation center, they put up, like, mini courts and all throughout the city, like, they really embrace it, so I feel like it's even if you don't go to the matches I almost said games, you can still feel part of it. But I also feel like, in a little bit of a way, that's what you do through your work and why I'm so excited. And what I mean by that is like creating experiences through the spaces that you create. But why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. Before I dive into it, I posted on my stories on Instagram, like whenever we started emailing 6 or 7 weeks ago, that I sent the most unhinged email I've ever sent and was like a couple days later and again, this is, like, gonna be the definition of where parasocial relationships are real versus, like, borderline become weird because I'm like, "I know you were in Washington, DC with your wife and your daughters," and I was like, "She's probably just hasn't seen it and busy," and I was like, "Oh my god, Claire, like, you're trying to be a professional, you should probably, like, not just write the first thing that comes out on paper and clean it up," and you replied and, like, one-upped me with like, "Oh, yeah, all of that is true and all of this. I'd love to talk about it." And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Likewise, and it was not unhinged. It was really kind, and I've really enjoyed listening to episodes of your podcast and kind of getting to know you a little bit through your podcast. So thank you. I love doing podcasts. I think it's just outside of a traditional print or web interview format. It's really nice to, kind of like chat things out a little bit more and dive into stuff that might not be so career focused. So thank you for having me.
Of course, and that's what I love about the format of it's like it's more nuanced and you have time for context and, as you said, soundboarding, talking things out. So, I heard a little bit as we were talking through the Knicks and coming up here for the US Open and different travels, have learned a little bit about you. Born and raised from Texas, have been in New
Mhm,
Orleans for almost 20 years, big
mhm.
sports fan. I know you love to travel, mom, business owner, so many things. Hattie, can you introduce yourself in your own words for us?
Sure. I am Hattie Sparks Collins. So professionally, most people know me as Hattie Sparks. It's my first and my middle name. I live in New Orleans. I moved here about 18 years ago. I live here with my wife, Rebecca, and our three daughters. So I have twin daughters and I have a stepdaughter. They're all finishing first grade this week. So they're all 7.5, and it's really, really fun age. I own my own residential and commercial design firm. We focus a lot on historic renovations, historic preservation, especially being in New Orleans. But we also handle new builds, some commercial projects, and hopefully branching out into more hospitality work. I've been doing that for about 7 years, coming up on 7 years, and before that, my previous life, I owned 2 retail stores in New Orleans that really focused on local and regional artists and designers. We eventually branched out to more independent designers that were from all over the country and worldwide, but I had a location uptown near Tulane and downtown, kind of closer to the business district. I came to New Orleans to get my master's in art history from Tulane. I was at TCU before that for undergrad in Fort Worth. Like you said, I was born in Texas. We lived in Houston till I was in first grade. And we moved up to Colorado actually when I was in first grade, just outside of Aspen. My parents at the time had 5 kids under the age 6 and under. I'm one of 6 girls. Yeah. I'm one of 6 girls. And they were living in Houston and they had both been born and raised in Houston, but they were kind of on that Houston society hamster wheel. And they just my mom describes it as, I saw not only my life, but I saw y'all's lives just already planned out where you were going to go to school, the country club we were at, if, you were all going to do the debutante thing. And she did that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think at that time, she was wrestling with some stuff about that part of her upbringing, and she just wanted something different for our family and for us to have some independence and take our own path. So we moved when I was in 1st grade, and we lived there for 10 years, and it was the best place to grow up. It's very different now. When I was there, I think the nicest thing we had was, like, Banana Republic or something. Now it's, Hermes and Fendi and, but we had a lot of freedom, and my last sibling was born in Colorado, another girl, 11 years older than her. We lived there till I was a junior in high school, and at that point, my parents really wanted to be back in Texas. We went back a lot for camp and to see family, but my parents' were getting older and they wanted to be closer to them. We moved back. I did 2 years of high school. My parents didn't want to move back to the city, so they moved to a small town outside San Antonio, Kerrville, where we had grown up going to camp. And, it was a big culture shock from a small town in the mountains of Colorado to a big public high school in Texas. And it was very cliche in a lot of ways. The football players, walking around in their jerseys and the cheerleaders in their outfits. And I remember my first day of school just thinking, this is not real. This is
Mm.
like a TV show. This is not real. But um 2 years of high school there, and then I went on to college and then here. So I've lived in New Orleans longer than I've lived anywhere else. So people who are truly from here, born and raised here, get a little territorial about, "Oh, you're not really from here." But I think, once I hit the 20-year mark and, I've owned several businesses here, I'm really involved, especially in the past couple years in the city and nonprofits, and I'm raising my kids here. I feel like I can say I'm from here. I just can't say where I went to high school, which is such a thing in New Orleans, but I feel like 20 years, I can say I'm from here.
Giving it to you. It's such an interesting thing. I mean,
Thank
first
you.
of all, so much there. Thank you for sharing. But
Yeah.
it's similar in New York. We've been here 11 years, and transplantism is such a thing. Like, born and raised New Yorkers make sure that it is known. And then anything that's wrong with the city is immediately, it's because of transplants. So, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there. But I think it's like kind of similar to what you're saying. I think I struggle with it, not in that it, like, weighs on me, but you have all this life experience and, growing up in different environments and communities, and then your chosen home, yours being New Orleans, ours being New York, like, your daughters were born there, that is their home, and it's this kind of, like,
Mhm.
separation of identity of, like, "Yes, I'm calling this my home, my daughters are raised here, I'm choosing to invest in the community in various ways," as you said, your multiple businesses. My kids, especially my 7-year-old, is, like, the most New York kid there is, like, takes the subway, eats hot dogs off of food carts, like,
I love
very.
it.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish I was like, "Can we rein it in a bit?" But it's interesting because, like, 'cause for them, it is just normal, and this is home, and, like, we say it's home now, but it's also that kind of, I don't know, thing of, like, "I didn't grow up here, but this is home." Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is definitely a lot of kind of that duality. And, for me, trying to explain to people, where I'm from and where I came from, when they ask me, I'm kind of like, Texas and Colorado and New Orleans. And, for my kids, the plan is to, stay here till they finish high school. So, they'll solidly be from here. And I'm excited for that for them because I always was a little envious of people who had the same friends from
Mhm.
grade school all the way up through high school. You know, I am so happy for the way that I grew up and so appreciative to my parents for letting us grow up in a place where we had a lot of freedom and a lot of independence and could explore. At the same time, I would look at those people, when I went to college and they had their best friend from 2nd grade who was coming to visit. And before the age of social media, you lost touch, and I didn't
Mhm.
really have that. And there's certainly people that I've reconnected with, um, over the past few years, but I'm really excited for our girls to have that, to have this really kind of rooted home in New Orleans and have such a solid group of friends. And I think when I think about New Orleans and people ask me what makes it special, I mean, you lived here for a time and there's so much that makes this city unique and so much that makes it special. But the number one thing I always say, outside of the obvious things, the culture, the food, the music, the art, the history, it's the people that live
Mhm.
here. I know I've lived pretty much my whole adult life here, but I have 5 siblings that live elsewhere. I have friends that live all over the country, and not knocking their friendships or communities or anything, but it's just so different here, and it's so special and unique to this city because there's a lot in the city that is unusual, and you get a little jaded to it, and there's a lot that's so different than living in a place, like I mean, New York is kinda that way too. You have to live there to really understand it,
Mhm.
and so the people that you're with, you are kind of bonded with over this shared experience of living in a city that is not always easy to live in. There's a lot of difficult things that come with living here. So to have a really great support group who understands it's hard to recreate that somewhere else. So that's what makes New Orleans so special to me is the people here.
Entirely, and I think it's that feeling of, like, I always say, like, if you're not part of something, you have to, like, take a step back before criticizing, and it's, like, similar to because we always thought we moved up here after college so I could go to graduate school, thinking once I graduated, we'd return to New Orleans, and that's where we'd set up life, and life just turned out differently for us, but it's that feeling of and, like, in New Orleans, I think is a little bit more outward. You can go anywhere and create that and get that. Not necessarily anywhere, but most places, they have your back and it's a very communal feeling.
Mhm.
Here, once you find it, everybody sort of bands together and it's like, yes, it's a really hard place to live. We're in small spaces. It's really expensive. We have to commute everywhere. And I live 5 blocks from the Met, and my kids go there after school,
Amazing.
and we can walk to Central Park, and we have playgrounds on either side of it. Like, there's so much beauty in all of it, but it is this, like, you just have to find your people to get through it with,
Mhm.
and I feel like you said, New York and New Orleans are two of those cities that share those similarities.
Yeah, and there's like that duality. It's a really incredible, beautiful place. Both places are to raise kids, but there is that grittiness to it.
Mhm,
And, I we don't expose our children to everything, but my opinion is that it's okay for them to see a little bit of the real world and what that looks like. And to see things maybe that are hard to look at and to ask questions about it from a young age. And obviously, we're not going to put them in a situation that's not safe or that's inappropriate. But, I think that serves kids well as they get older because they have a deeper sense of understanding and empathy versus somebody who might be coming in contact or experiencing that for the first time later in their teens or 20s. I know when I went to college, I had never met a gay person until I went to college.
mhm,
And so, and it's just because the spaces and the environments I grew up in,
mhm,
it wasn't there. It was smaller towns. We moved from Houston when I was really young, but even that environment was a very white bubble.
mhm,
And it wasn't until college that I met somebody with a different sexual orientation with, pretty majorly different, religious beliefs, political beliefs. I mean, even though TCU is a very conservative school, in the grand scheme of universities, there was still enough diversity that I was able to meet people that were different from me. And I had never had that experience before. So I'm glad that my kids are getting that now because I do think this wasn't the case for me, but I do think the more you meet people who are different than you earlier on, the more understanding and accepting you are of people's differences and the less kind of I don't want to say scary, but I do feel like some people when they meet people who have a wildly different perspective than them, they get a little taken aback because they don't really understand how to process the difference and kind of anyway, that's like a whole rabbit trail I could go down, but I'm glad that my kids get to grow up in a place like New Orleans because I do think it makes them more empathetic humans. I do think it makes them understand the realness and the grittiness of the world a bit more than I did when I was their age.
I completely understand what you're saying. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and similar, I mean, I don't know, I've visited Houston one time, but it's similar to what you're describing of there's a way that people look and think and experience life through a lens. There's a lack of exposure to diversity of experiences, and that's
Mhm.
what I really noticed. My mom told us I have 3 sisters, well, I'm one of 3. We had to leave the state of Missouri for college, and she also went to Loyola, so that was an
Okay.
easy one for me to follow. It was not a hard sell necessarily. So went to school down there and then moved up here for graduate school, thinking again we'd be back in New Orleans, but when you start and then I got pregnant, recognizing, like, the way
Yeah.
people can show up and there's more experiences than just mine, and that having that as information makes it, again, less scary, more of a just
Mhm.
a, "This is the way things are, this is the
Yeah,
way
this
things
is the
can be."
world.
Right.
Well, and I think it's not meant to be performative. It's not meant to be, let's go in, spaces that are not meant for us. Because I do understand and I recognize that there are spaces and there are traditions that really we can appreciate and be observers of, but they're not really meant for us. And that's okay. I want my kids, like you said, to understand that there are, you know, countless ways to experience life. And the way that we experience life is not going to be the same as how somebody else experiences it. And you get to see that, I think, a bit more in a city like New Orleans or a city like New York. It's not like a performative thing. It's not like, hey, we're going to take you here so you can see, drag show because you need to experience it. If something happens and they experience it or they're a part of it, we really want them to understand uh, that there's lots of different ways to exist in the world.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. We are.
So the way that I've come to know you is through social media. So I'm just going to put that out there of, like, the parasocial relationship, which I feel impressed by the way that you have shown up. And I think it's easy in retrospect to say, like, in 2026, oh, yeah, well, now we want people to be vulnerable and we want them to be real and we want them to be
Yeah.
authentic and we want to not have these curated or, like, super aesthetic feeds, although I'm gonna pause right there because everything you post is just so beautiful.
That's
But I think in addition to the actual when you're showing your actual work, you show up, to me, seems like as your full self, and because I also have an Instagram page and on social media, I realize that you can show up in your full self and being your full self without showing everything that's going on in your life necessarily.
yeah.
So, like, you are being authentic and genuine in whatever you're showing or talking about or doing, and it's likely the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more. But what I'm impressed by, Hattie, is that I didn't realize when I was following you back in 2014, 15, 16, you were doing all of this before it was the thing to do. And it feels like you've always had this very authentic and down to earth persona. And whether that felt natural or was natural, you'll tell me. But I just recall, so in college, I remember going to your store. I think it was up on Maple Street. I know it was by
Yeah.
Bruno's.
Yeah.
Of course I have to cite a bar. And then we moved before you opened your downtown location. I remember you talking
Mhm.
about maybe having an outpost at when they were building MSY. But I remember it was Mother's Day 2017,
Mhm.
a post that being very, very vulnerable of, I thought this was going to be the day I was announcing a pregnancy. I thought this was going to be a day I was being celebrated as a new mom. And instead, I'm sharing that I had a miscarriage.
Mhm.
And I don't know why this is making me feel emotional recalling it on your
Gosh.
behalf. But I think that I wasn't yet pregnant. I got pregnant at the end of 2017. So it wasn't on my radar really, motherhood, but the way in which you shared your story with such raw vulnerability and just grace in that too. I had never met you, but was like, oh my gosh, my heart breaks for her. And I am now cheering for you so hard that I want this motherhood journey for you. And I share that because that was again when you had your stores and brick and mortar spaces, and you said I think it's been 6 or 7 years now since you've been doing the residential and commercial design. But I
Mhm.
feel like you bring this level, and I'm going back to use the word experience, but full self and care to the designs that you put together and in these spaces that you're creating. I will share that I have told my mom and everyone in my family, like, one day, a definition of me making it is when Hattie designs my home. Like,
Oh
that
my god, that's so nice.
no,
That's so nice.
it's true because I just feel like you bring such color and depth and create a feeling in a space versus just a beautiful room, which again, they're absolutely stunning. So like that's not in question here, but I feel like you bring so much of yourself into it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying all of that. It's really kind. Thank you.
What has it been like for you? Talk to us about your journey from stores to designing interiors. There's the professional side of it, but you've had so much going on personally throughout that as well.
Yeah. So, um, like you mentioned, I had 2 stores. I had my first location uptown. I started it in 2012. Um, and I look back now and I'm like, I don't know. I was so young and I just went for it and did it. And I had a second location. And I eventually closed the first location just to focus on the second location because it was a lot bigger. But it was also around that time that I was trying to have a baby and start a family. And I had a miscarriage. I got pregnant. I had a really hard time getting pregnant. And I was taking, oral medication. I was, doing all the things. And it finally happened. And I miscarried around like 12 and a half weeks, 13 weeks. So I was almost out of my first trimester, which was the experience. It was a very traumatic experience, and I'm not gonna go into detail because it's, hard for me to talk about, and I also don't wanna, you know, trigger anything in anybody, but, it was in the emergency room. There were some decisions made by doctors that I look back now and I cannot believe that
Mm.
I went through that, and it was like I was having an out of body experience, and I think a lot about that experience now in hindsight, and I think about how much women are not listened to and how we really need to not only advocate for ourselves, but find people who will advocate for us if we're not being listened to.
Mhm.
There were some things that happened that I didn't want to happen during the process of being in the emergency room. And I was basically told by a female doctor on call to essentially lay down and be quiet.
Mm.
And I was in a great deal of pain, obviously physically, but emotionally, it was an experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And, you know, also to be that far along, any miscarriage is devastating. If you are unlucky enough to have multiple, which I did, everyone is a little different. But this one being the first time that I actually got pregnant and being so close to being out of my first trimester and then going through what I went through in the hospital, it was horrible.
I'm so
And
sorry.
then well, thank you. And thanks for listening. And, I got pregnant again pretty quickly after that and I miscarried again around 7 weeks. And it was kind of around then that I started rethinking, I mean, a lot, but my career in particular. I just started realizing that it wasn't sustainable for me to continue on in that career, in that industry, and the expectations and the requirements of running that business weren't going to be conducive with having a family and having an infant. And so after my second miscarriage, my doctor said, "You really need to go see a fertility specialist. You know, you're young, you're healthy." It took 5 years to get pregnant, and we didn't do the IVF route just because it was kind of, stopping and starting, trying. She goes, "But two in a row this quickly together, you should go talk to somebody." So that's when I decided I needed to close my business and I needed to pivot to something that was a bit more flexible, a bit more predictable. And it's funny because every time I've pivoted to something more predictable in my life, I've hated it so much. So I'm like, but I felt like I needed to do that in that moment to have a little bit more stability and control over schedule. And so I started going to see a fertility specialist and ended up, it was like there's and I'll talk to you about this because this is like crazy and I've never really shared much of this before, but I found out that I was pregnant with the twins like the same weekend that I was miscarrying at 13 weeks. So it was like a year later.
Wow.
So, yeah. So this time of the year, end of April, kind of around Jazz Fest time, that's when a lot of big things have happened in my life.
Mm.
The miscarriage, finding out I was pregnant with the twins, leaving my marriage, which is a whole nother story. A lot has happened. Um, but when I found out I was pregnant, had been doing IUIs. I think it's just like the second or third round, and I was doing shots. I was taking oral medication, and the doctor told me, she said, with the amount of drugs you're pumping into your system, you should expect to have multiples, at least two. When she was like, at least two, I was like, at least, I don't know if I could handle more than two. But the thought of twins was really exciting for me. I wasn't honestly like freaked out by it. So when I found out I was pregnant, you have to wait a certain period of time before you go in for the blood test. But I had to go to a family wedding in Houston the day after I found out, and I went on a walk by myself, and I remember talking to them. I just had a feeling that it was 2, and
Mm.
I just was like, "Guys, stay in there. Hang on, like, just stay in there." And I just had a feeling that it was 2 of them, and so when I went into the doctor and they did the blood test, they're like, "All right, come, you're definitely pregnant. Come back in 2 days," or I don't know how you forget all this stuff once you're out of it. And if it goes up a certain amount, then it's probably 2 or 3. So sure enough, went back and they were like, "All right, your levels are pretty high." So when I found out for sure and we saw the first ultrasound of twins, it was almost like this feeling that like those 2 miscarriages, and not to be like too like woo woo, but it was almost like those 2 coming back to me.
Mhm.
And I think at that time in my life when I got pregnant the first 2 times, a lot of the reason pregnancies don't work out is because of science. And my doctor explained it that way to me. She said, you know, this is your body's way of protecting you and protecting that baby from a really difficult situation or maybe a really poor quality of life. And it was really helpful for me in that moment to kind of reframe it that way versus like, what's wrong with me? Why couldn't my
Mhm.
body handle this? Um, but I also think too, it was, the universe's way of protecting me because I was not ready emotionally or mentally at that point in my life to be a mom. And I don't know if anybody's ever like fully ready to be a mom because as you
Fair.
know, like it's nothing what you think it's not at all what you think it's going to be like. And it's so much harder than you think it's gonna be, and it's difficult to explain to people who haven't gone through it why it's hard, and so it's like one of those things, you can't really explain it until you're in it, and looking back at myself in 2017, I don't think I was at a place where I was emotionally or mentally equipped to be the best mom that I could be. And I don't honestly don't know if I really was even there yet when I got pregnant with the twins, but that moment of getting pregnant with them and really throughout my pregnancy and then having them, that is when I just had like this, like, it's hard to articulate. That's when I just had this total shift in mentality to I have to get my shit together.
Hmm.
Not that I was like all over the place. I mean, I think by all accounts, I really did have it together, but I needed to do things for myself and I needed to focus on myself so that I could be the best mom possible for them, learn how to take better care of myself. I needed to get myself right, mentally and emotionally. And that work continued long. It's still continuing. I mean, it's always continuing. But I just had this moment where I was like, okay, this is it. I don't think I'm having any more kids after this. This is my shot to do it and to do it right. And so I need to like really take stock of my life and who I am and what I want for my kids and what I want for myself. Because if I'm not good, they're not going to be. There's some statistic that the biggest indicator of a child's well being and success and mental and emotional stability is the happiness of their mother, their mom. I mean, nobody else. And so hearing that, it made me realize how important it was for me to really take a look at the way that I was living and the situation that I was in and make a decision for my future and for their future. So, I had a good pregnancy. I had no complications. I carried them to 36 and a half weeks. I delivered them both, really easy labor. So physically, the pregnancy was not very difficult. And I'm so thankful for that. They didn't have to stay in the NICU. They were small when they were born, but I was only in the hospital for 2 days. We got to go home. So I'm really thankful for an easy pregnancy physically because emotionally and mentally, it was, I mean, just turmoil.
I have had the similar experience of motherhood just unlocks something in you, and it's hard to
Hmm.
put words to other than it's a feeling and it's an experience and it's a knowing. It sounds like
Hmm.
you experienced a lot of that in having a couple of pregnancies, one being viable and going through your pregnancy with your twins. What did that look like for you?
Well, that kind of realization and recognition that I needed to make a significant change happened really kind of crystallized when I was pregnant. And then even more so in the weeks after I had the twins. And I think the difficulty of being a mother and how taxing that was, it kind of threw everything else into relief.
Mm.
And nothing else compared to this experience. Everybody says having kids changes your life and it does. And for me, it changed the way that I saw everything. I was looking, 10 years down the road and thinking, do I want my girls to look at their mom and see this emotionally exhausted woman, or do I want them to see somebody who chose herself, even in the face of people calling her selfish, who has worked on herself, mind, body, spirit, who stands up for herself, who stands up for us, who has worked to become a person that she's proud of and that we're proud of. That's what I wanted. And I knew that I couldn't achieve that. I just knew I couldn't achieve it being in the marriage that I was in. And, getting out of a marriage is eh, a lot of times, when people tell me that they're going through a divorce, my first inclination is like, I'm so sorry you're going through that because it is very, very difficult, even if it is the right decision, which if you're getting divorced, it's the right decision for somebody, and eventually you'll realize it was the right decision for both of you because happy marriages don't end. They just don't. A lot of marriages, a lot of unhappy marriages continue on, and people can suffer from that, whether it's the people in the marriage, their children, their friends, their family. But the second thing I think of when somebody tells me that they're getting a divorce is almost kind of like, all right, good for you. You made the hardest decision that I can possibly think of, because not only does it come with a lot of grief over grieving what you thought your life was going to be, it comes with a lot of logistics, which are just maddening. It comes with a lot of sadness and loneliness and questioning, did I do the right thing? And wondering what your life is going to look like now and what your life is going to look like for your kids. And it also comes with a lot of outside judgment. I felt that really, really hard when I was going through my divorce. And, we separated when the twins were 5 months old. So I was on my own with 5-month-old twins. I was still breastfeeding. I mean, it was very raw because to be postpartum and having to make that, and I had to make that decision. And I'm the kind of person where I'll think about something and think and think and think and think. And then once I make my mind up, like, that's it. But there was a lot of questions, like you said, I've had kind of a social media presence for a while, and I did used to share a lot. I've pulled back a lot on what I share. And this experience, this post-divorce, post-separation experience is part of why. After we separated, I was pretty quiet on social media, and eventually I think people started to notice something was different, and I started getting DMs from people constantly asking me, "Where's your husband? Why don't you post him anymore? Are you getting a divorce? What's going on?" And these are people who either I did not know, had never met before, or barely knew, and it felt really intrusive.
Mhm.
And I know that there's this school of thought, and I actually had somebody say this to me once, "Well, you chose that. You
Mhm.
chose you chose to invite people into, your life, so, you know, you chose that. You deserve this." And I was kinda like, "Wait a minute. Nobody deserves to feel like their life and their choices are being, you know, constantly called into question." So that to me was a little bit of a turning point because I felt like, all right, I feel a little too exposed and I feel like I need to pull back a bit, which was a good thing because it really did start making me think about choices we make as women and how they get categorized by other people. And this view of women making choices for themselves as being selfish.
Mhm.
And I spent a lot of time in therapy talking about what does it mean? What does being selfish mean? And why is that such a bad thing? I have one life. Shouldn't I want to make sure that I'm living it authentically and that I'm living it in the best way that I can and doing everything that I can to better myself on every plane? And shouldn't I be spending it making decisions that are going to help my girls grow up with a mom who is fully there and fully herself? I don't think that's selfish. I think that is a difficult decision that I made and that I didn't make lightly. And I think it's when people see a woman making a decision that is gut wrenching and difficult, I think their first inclination is to call it selfish because women are always expected to put somebody else ahead of themselves. And so if you choose anything for yourself, it's like, wow, she's selfish. She left, 5 months in, and it's like, listen, nobody makes those decisions lightly. It's not like a snap decision. So after that, I did pull back a bit on how much I shared about my personal life, and I do hold a lot back. And I think, one thing that I've kind of come to realize, especially over the last 6 or 7 years, is not everybody needs all of me. And I think when I was running my businesses and that was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I was interacting a lot with people online, and I'd formed these relationships, like very, solid, valid relationships because of sharing things about my life. And that was really valuable for me. I didn't really need that anymore. And I also didn't feel like it was healthy or safe for me, honestly, to open up my whole life to be subject to comment or criticism by people who don't really know my full story, who don't really know me personally. And so there are certain things that I like to share because it makes me happy too. And then there's a lot that just
Doesn't
stays off the internet. We just keep it offline. But, the internet is it's an interesting animal because you need it when you're in business. A lot of you need it to survive. My business is such a visual business, and that's how I get more work, is by putting my projects online. Um, and people want to see a personality behind the business. So it's kind of like, all right, we got to put a little bit of myself online too. But, with that comes a lot of comments from the peanut gallery that I've really learned to ignore and just like, okay, we use the block button, when needed. And I think getting older has helped me tune a lot of that out. And it's helped me just not give it any oxygen because somebody who doesn't really know me, their opinion doesn't hold any weight compared to, if it was my sister or one of my best friends saying that, then I would be like, oh my God, we need to talk. Something's wrong. But a total stranger, I'm just like, okay, bye, Jessica. I'm going to block you.
time to leave the space, not for you. I think it's such a skill set though that we aren't taught about. I read this quote somewhere where they said like when people start disagreeing with them online, like they had to be reminded, I don't even like everybody. So like,
No.
what's the expectation that everybody likes me? And not that what you're saying is like a like thing, but it's okay to put up these boundaries and also like protect yourself and not to say
Yeah.
protect your peace because that feels like overwhelmed, but truly it can take up so much space and you get into this or could get the tendency to get into this playing defense on the internet with people who aren't going to be open-minded to
No.
sharing that like they have going back to the beginning of our conversation this belief or misconception about a woman who decides to leave her marriage. And no matter what level of detail you share with them, that's never going to be an acceptable or valid reason to them. And so it's like exactly as you did, you just need to find the balance of this is my decision and I am sticking with it. And it is the best decision for me and my family and my daughters. And that's all you need to know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I know. 100%. And it took a while to get there, but I finally did. And I'm glad that not to say that sometimes things don't like irritate me when I read them, but it's kind of like, all right, moving on. This is like not real life.
Like you said, the peanut gallery will be the peanut gallery.
Always, always.
I feel like going back to what you were saying, sort of like bringing this full circle a little bit, at least from what I'm hearing of when your parents and especially your mom, it sounded like made the very thoughtful decision for you guys to leave Texas and go to Colorado and have a very different upbringing than what she knew. That sounds like a gift that she gave you to be able to have some of this more expansive thinking and experience and just sort of, again, what we were talking about. But very
Mm.
similarly, what you did for yourself and your daughters in leaving your marriage, and it sounds like having a lot of self-reflection and therapy, which I always endorse,
Yeah.
but making a decision that was needed and the best thing for where you were and what you needed out of your life gives your daughters the gift of setting the example of you want them to one day be young women who are self-assured, who are confident in what they need, and then taking the action to do that for themselves. Um, I'm not divorced. We have our 10-year anniversary this summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's hard. Being married's hard. Um,
you know, I'm married again and I just, but it's hard in that I saw this on the internet somewhere. It's like marriage is not hard it shouldn't be hard because you're fighting all the time. It's hard because you hit your head on the cabinet door that your spouse left open again. And it's just like this, accumulation of little things. And of course, there are big, hard moments, but every time I would hear marriage is hard, I would think, when I was younger, like, is it supposed to be this hard? Because I didn't think it was supposed to be this
Yeah,
hard.
it's that's very fair. So my parents got divorced when I was 5, and this was back in early 1990s, where divorce wasn't as common or talked about as it is these days. And so I know just from like my mom and having like conversations with her about being a single mom in the 1990s when she was also had to work to support us, and that decision she always like feels back. She's like, I felt like I was like breaking up your and your sister's upbringing, and like you weren't going to have a two-parent household, and she ended up getting remarried as well. But I was like, Mom, like that was such a gift. You guys were not a good couple. Like you were not meant to be together. And being
Mm,
in an environment where you two were able to be your best selves and like leaving that dynamic behind gave
mhm.
us an example of what healthy relationships do look like. Like if you had stayed, we would have only had a relationship of like white knuckling it and like
Yeah.
obviously all relationships take compromise, but like unhealthy compromise for each
Mhm.
other. So just a like, not that you need a reframe, but like from a growing up with divorced parents and navigating all of that, like it's been a secret weapon. And especially going into like relationships I've been in and now my marriage where I'm like, we're actually going to talk about this and it sucks and we don't want to, but like
Yeah.
we have to figure this out because this is the alternative. And so I think it just gives you a different perspective having different experiences than we had
Yeah.
both.
Well, and thank you for sharing all that with me. And, that's really similar to the perspective that I take. And somebody said something to me pretty early on, and it was the best thing for kids is 2 happy parents, and sometimes that means that those parents aren't together, and so much of what kids learn is from their parents modeling it for them, and especially raising girls, I'm who they're looking to, and I wanted to make sure that who they were looking to was somebody that I was proud of and that somebody who was setting a good example for them. And, I think there's obviously going to be things later on in life, and there have been questions that they've asked that might feel really kind of like tender and tricky, but this is all they've ever known too. And so I do think, looking back, was it insane to become a single mom with 5-month-old twins? Yeah. But they've never known any different. And I'm not judging anybody else's decisions or experience. I know what it's like to feel judged, but I had a lot of friends come to me and say, my parents stayed married until I graduated from high school or until I graduated from college, and they were so unhappy, and it was like they were just waiting for me to get out of the house, and it's like they were staying together for me, and the amount of guilt that that put on me as a kid to feel like I'm why these
Mhm,
2 people
mhm.
who are miserable together won't just go out and live their own lives. They were like, it was a lot of guilt to carry around as a kid. So again, everybody makes their decisions based on, the information that they have and what they feel like they're equipped to handle. And so I'm not judging anybody else's, journey or choices, but hearing that from my friends really it was reassuring for me because everybody has heard stories like that. Like, oh, my parents, they waited till I went off to college and then that was it. And I didn't want that I didn't want that for my girls, and I didn't want them to be telling that same story, 20 years from now. Yeah.
I was just watching a clip from a commencement speaker because it's graduation season, and it was Reshma Sujani, who's the former founder of Girls Who Code, and she was saying um, that bravery. She was talking about to the students like we don't need more skills right now. What we need is more bravery. And a lot of people think bravery is wearing a superhero cape and like coming in to save the day. And actually, what bravery looks like is making the hard decision that no one else understands, but is the right decision. It's walking in and being the one voice that you know is true to yourself and is the right thing, and championing that even when you're the only one standing alone in that decision. And then she was also talking about how it's a muscle, and the first time you do it, it's really sore and it feels bad after. And even while you're doing it, and the second time, a little bit less. And then by the 10th time, you're just living your life leading with bravery and courage. And so I feel like in some ways, like continuing to follow your journey through this, you found love again. You're
Me too.
now remarried and raising a blended family. I've also seen the art that you've created through the spaces that you design, um, and it feels like a hard and brave decision you made several years ago was very much the right decision.
It was, and thank you. I love that description of bravery, and so now I really wanna go find that speech and
I'll
watch
send you
it.
the clip. I saved it.
Please do, because it's so true. It really is like a muscle, like any sort of frame of thinking. Like we talk a lot about in our house about how, you know, gratitude is a muscle and gratitude helps you, live your life, from the perspective of I get to do this and I'm lucky to get to go through these experiences. And it just gets easier and easier to think that way as time goes on. And bravery is, you know, the same thing, and I've never really thought of myself as a particularly brave person, but I've had people throughout, my 20s, 30s, and I just turned 40, so I'm, heading into that decade, tell me, "You're so brave." And I think I've just been always been that kind of person who's just like, I just do it and I forge ahead. And sometimes, sometimes that is bravery. Sometimes pushing through is the brave thing to do. But what I've realized as I've gone through so many different experiences, especially in my 30s, is that sometimes bravery means pulling back. And sometimes bravery means quieting down. And bravery means really looking inward and looking at yourself in the mirror and making time to be introspective and really be honest with yourself about who you are and the decisions that you're making and how you're moving throughout the world. That's a really hard thing to do. And it's also a really brave thing to do. I mean, I used to shy away from a lot of really difficult conversations and experiences. And after what after things that I've gone through, I'm kind of like, nothing feels that hard. I mean, things are still hard, but I'm kind of like, oh, I can do this. This is like no big deal.
I mean,
I can do this.
I even think the decision to fall in love and get married again is a brave thing to do. I think there could be an easy way to say, I did that. It was hard. I don't want to put myself through this again. You have to really open yourself up. Was that an active decision for you of I want to get back out there, I want to start dating, or did it find you kind of where you needed it?
Kind of found me where I needed it. It was not expected. I think when we did start dating, we were both going through divorces. We both had, infants. And we talked a lot about when we first started dating, making sure that this was not a situation where we were just each other's port in the storm.
Hmm.
Because neither of us wanted to get into a relationship that was where the foundation was, oh, we're trauma bonding over a shared experience. And that becomes the whole basis of our relationship. So we were really careful to make sure we talked about, okay, what do we want in a relationship? What are we dealing with right now? You need to deal with your stuff. I'm dealing with my stuff. We're not going to commingle those and take on the other person's burden. I mean, that's easier said than done because, of course, like the more longer you're in a relationship, that person's problems become your problems. But, um, I think it was a different approach for me than any relationship I had ever been in because it was approached with a lot of thought and a lot of care. and a lot of understanding that there were other people involved.
Mhm.
And, I mean, our children, knowing that we both were going through something difficult. Her situation was very different than mine, but still a hard situation. So it was really different than any relationship I'd ever been in. And I'd never approached a relationship this way where I like really thought about really thought about it. Every other relationship I'd been in, it was just like, okay, like we're hanging out and now we're dating and it is what it is. And it just kind of rolled through. And this was so different because I really had to stop and think about, okay, how do I want to approach this? How do I make sure that we protect this really good, you know, foundation of friendship that we have? How do we make sure that we are not letting the individual, trauma that we're going through become the central focus of, what we build our relationship on? So it felt very thoughtful. And I needed that. And I needed somebody who wanted to approach a relationship in a very thoughtful way. If we all stop to think a little bit more about what do I want? How does that person fit into that? Maybe we all could have saved ourselves a little bit of heartache and time. Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful story of where you landed today despite all of the twists and turns to get there.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about Hattie Sparks Interiors and as, you've just shared what was going on personally for you as you had your twins, you left your marriage at 5 months postpartum when they were newborns, finding love again. In conjunction with all of this, you're founding a business, growing a business, taking on more projects. What was that like, and what does your work look like today?
Well, it was a lot. I feel like I don't do anything halfway. So when the twins were like less than a year old, I was consulting for brands that were moving to New Orleans, helping them get, their occupational license, their staff set up. I was I was the territory rep for the Real Real for the Gulf
Mm.
Coast. So I was like zipping up and down, like all over the place doing that. And then I had started designing projects for kind of smaller projects and that began to grow. But it was that collection of things that I was doing allowed me a lot of flexibility and allowed me to work from home. And I had somebody who did come and help me during the day. And so if I needed to run out, um, she was there with the kids, but I would sit in my bedroom on my bed, with my headphones on and work. And when they were out in the living room, and eventually the design work started growing just because word of mouth. And New Orleans is such a word of mouth city. And so I was ramping up on client work. And so I was able to stop with the other two things, which was really nice to be able to just to focus on one thing. And I'd been interested in design for a long time. My background's in art history. I have a master's in contemporary Latin American art history. And when I was running my store, I started carrying smaller home goods. So artwork, furniture pieces, lighting. And I was consuming a lot of media about the interior design industry. So blogs, shelter magazines. There weren't really podcasts at that time, but I was so interested in it as a career, but I just thought, I've got to go back to school for this. Eventually, when I got to the point where I wanted to try it, I reached out to a few friends of mine in the industry and kind of asked for their advice. Should I go back to school? Should I do this? And all of them said, give it a shot without going back to school first. If you really feel like you need to go to get the technical aspect of things and the certifications, by all means do it. But in this industry, a lot of it is you've either got it or you don't. It was the steepest learning curve, and I'm still learning so much. There's still names of, you know, fabric houses that I skewer and get like roasted for on the internet because I said it wrong. And I'm like, I'm not French. I'm sorry. I'm still learning a lot, but I feel like I'm in a really like good place in my career. There's obviously been ups and downs, just like with any business, but we're in a really good groove right now. We have some really, really exciting projects and some collaborations and some fun stuff coming out later this summer that I can't talk about. And I never thought I would be the person who would say that, like, oh, I've got a secret project I can't talk about, but I really do. I really have a couple that I can't talk about.
Made it.
So I'm excited. I'm excited for August because that's kind of when everything's gonna come out. But um it was a lot of saying yes to everything so that I could eventually say no to things.
I love
And
that.
I think that is something that was really important for me to learn, and it really helped kind of stretch me from, like, a creative standpoint, but also, like, a logistical standpoint. 6 months after I started my business, COVID, and I thought, like, "Great, this career's over. It's never gonna take off," and it did, and it's leveled off a lot, in the past couple years, but, um, that was such a blessing in disguise for me with my firm because I had to learn and adapt really quickly in this, you know, this world where supply chain was totally upside down and lead times were, 52 weeks for you could have a baby before you could get a sofa. Like, it was crazy. I just started, so it was not hard for me to pivot. And that was really a gift to me and allowed me to be learn how to be really light on my feet and really adaptable and not get really stuck in one way of doing things. And now nothing feels as hard as
It's that bravery
it was.
muscle. You've been
Yeah,
flexing.
nothing feels as hard as it was during COVID. If a client ever complains about, like, oh, a 12-week lead time, I'm like, that's
It's not worth
nothing.
it.
But we've gotten to do some really, really incredible work here, with amazing clients. Most of our projects now are New Orleans, Gulf Coast. We've got a couple. We've got one in South Carolina that's just kicking off. Um, and what I really enjoy doing is learning about the client and learning about how they live and figuring out, okay, well, how do we kind of meld that with my firm's, like, signature style? Because you came to me for a reason, you like what I do, but it's also your house. And I think you want a room and you want a house to really speak to the person that lives in it and the people that live in it. And I think sometimes I'll walk into a space and it doesn't feel like the person that lives there, whether it was they just told the decorator or the designer to, like, do whatever they want, or they were overruled or whatever. But I love walking into a house and knowing exactly who lives there and who they are and what they care about and what their personality is, and if they like, maximalism, or if they're a minimalist, and if they've got kids or pets. To me, your home is such a reflection of who you are. And so I don't want clients to ever feel like, okay, yeah, this just feels like I'm living in, like, a space, a Hattie space. I want them to feel like she helped kind of pull out of me what I dreamed about for my home and what I want it to feel like and how I want it to function. She helped kind of pull that out of me, and she put her little, sprinkled some signature elements in there, but this is very much me and a reflection of me. So that's really such a fun part of the job, is just connecting with people on that level and helping them, it's bring this vision that they may not even know that they have out of them into life. And then the, restoration part of it, we are about to start this really cool project here on St. Charles Avenue.
Mm.
And this house is amazing and the history behind it's amazing. And it's really cool working in New Orleans with these homes that have so much history and so much personality and quirks that, sometimes are difficult to design around, but it makes us better designers because we have to design around a room that's, like, not square or slanted or has a weird window.
Mhm.
And it's special to be able to bring life back into these buildings that have been around for, over 100 years. So that's really unique to us here. There's not a lot of new builds. We're not doing a lot of like white box new builds, which sometimes is fun because you can like really do whatever you want.
Like,
But I love going into a house, an old house, and seeing all the molding and the grand staircase and the beautiful medallions on the ceiling and uncovering original wallpaper. I think that is like maybe that's the art historian in me is I love to uncover a story and a story about a house, a story about a family, and then kind of run with that and make it something new and special.
well, I think it's like you were saying of that process of working with a family, getting to know them, you're then creating the next chapter of the story in their space. And it was actually so like light bulb moment for me. I mean, look at my background versus your background. I have a no I have a dead plant. You like your jewelry matches your background. Like you it's
Oh,
so beautiful. And but I've never been able to figure out like I started Rent the Runway to try and figure out my own personal dressing style. I have not yet graduated onto our house, or that's not a house, it's an apartment. But when you were saying that trying to get to know them and having spaces that reflect them, it was a light bulb for me because I always look at something, frequently your Instagram, but like other things that I've seen of like, oh, I love the way this looks. And then I'll try and figure out a way to do it. And first of all, I can't. But second of all, I'll come up with something. I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. And so I love what you said about, like, you're working like, I'll just give an example. So, like, my kids, when we renovated our apartment 4 years ago, we purchased it and we got renoed it before we moved in, and it was all white, basically. Um, so I did, like, star wallpaper in my kids' room, and then I have
cute.
the most loud I looked at it on a screen wallpaper in our bathroom, having already tiled the bathroom, not considering, like, to put these things next to each other before I buy it and put it on the wall.
Yeah.
And then, like, have, like, a completely different look in our bedroom. I left our bathroom alone literally before I had our 3rd baby. I was like, "This bathroom is so ugly." I put in a shelf with a plant on it, which is also dead now.
I can't I'm with you. I can't keep plants alive. There's some fake ones over there, but yeah.
But it's like, this is a way of saying, like, thank you for finding a way to work with people that don't have it in them, because that's me. But the spaces that you create, I think they do evoke this feeling that we've been talking about. And as I heard you say, sort of have like a couple of signature looks and styles. They're beautiful to see, and I love that you take us
Thank you.
along for the journey. I am so, as the kids say, sat for what's coming in August.
Well, it's really exciting and it's, all around like professional milestone. First of all, I appreciate you saying all of that. It's really like so nice to hear and um I think there's a lot of what we do and that I do that just feels really instinctual and like I don't know how to explain it. And I told my wife this. I was like, it's like I can look at 10 combinations of things and it's just like I have this like visceral reaction if it's not right. And
Mhm.
it's like the minute it's right and like my team probably hates that because I'm just like, no, that's not right. We need to edit it, edit, edit, edit. And it's like when I see it, it's just like, yes, that's it. Like I know it's right. Or the scale of something like that's way too small, it's way too big. Again, like, I don't know if it's just, like, my background and my background just into everything, education, career-wise, that kind of, like, has honed that instinct in me, but, I'm coming up on 7 years of my firm, and to have these milestones coming up, within this industry, it's notoriously kind of a hard industry to break into, and when you do start hitting these personal or professional goals and milestones, it is really validating. I mean, and it's really meaningful. And I had one last year actually that I hit. One of my goals was to be on Homeworthy and do a house tour on Homeworthy because I love Homeworthy. And I was, and it was so great and such a great experience. And I loved, showing off my house and my art collection. And I have a story behind everything. And maybe I'm too long winded, but that's just who I am. And I should not have read the comments on YouTube
No.
because, most of them were great. Just like with the social media conversation we had earlier, there's always going to be somebody with something to say. And I need to it's not a zero sum game. Like, I need to remind myself because I read those comments and this was a huge milestone for me. I was so excited and I was so deflated. And it does not take away from this achievement that I wanted for so long and this milestone. Like, don't let, that pie shrink down to nothing. Like, enjoy it and just like ignore them.
Just
So,
remember that for all of those comments on YouTube or whatever that don't belong, delete, block, and leave them away. There's
yeah.
me and so many others I know that are
Oh,
going to be
yeah.
listening to this episode that title emails to you shooting a shot and are so excited by the work you put together, by the work that you do, and are so
That's so
inspired
nice.
by the stories that you share as you do it. So
Well, that
thank
is
you.
something that I definitely keep in mind.
Hattie, thank you so much. You have shared so much with us, and I was so excited when you said yes. I loved hearing all you had to share today. If there are women who are listening, there is so much that you have been through as a business owner, as going through infertility struggles, as a mom, as someone who's been divorced and remarried. There's so much that you could leave with them. Talk to the women who are going through something and, want to figure out how to move forward. What are you saying to them?
You can be scared and brave at the same time.
I love that.
And I think about that all the time because just because you feel scared, that is not a reason not to do it, whatever it is. If you know, and women especially, we have such a great intuition. If you know that something is meant for you or not meant for you, or there's a direction that you need to take, just because, if you know for sure, just because you're scared doesn't mean don't do it. It means this is going to be scary along the way, but I'm brave and I can handle it. So be scared, but do it anyway.
I love that. Hattie, thank you for chatting with us this afternoon. I'm so appreciative that you shared so much with us. I'm going to be continuing to watch and see what happens in August
No,
and
thanks.
sharing all of your beautiful projects.
Thank you. Well, thank you for
And
having me. This was so wonderful. I appreciate it.
come back anytime because I feel like there's so many other things that we could continue to talk about because as you were saying that, I'm like, are you into horoscopes?
Oh,
And
yeah.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah. Aquarius, Libra moon, Libra rising.
I want to touch it and I'm gonna just say, let's go Knicks.
We're all air signs here. But yes, go Knicks. Fingers crossed. And I hope we can do this maybe again soon, maybe a part two.
Awesome. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Claire.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Catch Up with Claire. If you did, I would so appreciate if you subscribe, follow, rate, and comment wherever you're listening from. Share it with someone else you think might enjoy listening. This is how I can continue to have these conversations and bring these conversations to you. Until next time, be kind, be brave, and be safe out there.